How to Create a Glitch. The Complete Series. Glitch Stories. Season 1 Chapter 2. This is the story of, well, I guess I'll call it the mysterious force. This happened in 2015. So, on one particular evening in 2015, I think it was in the summertime, I was listening to music in my house, and I just had this impulse to go down to the train tracks near my house. It was probably 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Anyway, I went for a walk and about 10 minutes later I arrived at the train tracks just down from my house. It was at the bottom of a hill and there was a passenger train station nearby. This happened in Ontario, Canada. So anyway, I arrived at the train station near my house. It was pitch black. There were stars in the sky, and I started kind of playing, so to speak, on the train tracks. Jumping back and forth. I contemplated waiting for a train just to see what would happen after about 10-15 minutes of this game. I heard a train in the distance. So, I climbed up onto the train platform and I gazed out at the train as it approached. Now, at the front of the train, there was a white light. I guess a headlight on the front of the train. But as the train approached, that white light became brighter and more intense, and it was strange. I was standing at the edge of the train platform as the train approached and the light seemed to mesmerize me, and I was transfixed on it. And it seemed to widen and coalesce into a great circle of white light. Now I had this strange impulse, and I can't explain it, really, but I wasn't suicidal, or I didn't have any desire to hurt myself. But some impulse in me compelled me to stand on the end of the train platform so that part of my body was over top of where the train would pass. And so, I did that, and the train approached at high speed. It was a freight train, not a passenger train, so it wouldn't stop in the station. And when the train reached me, I closed my eyes, or as it reached me, I closed my eyes. And all of a sudden, the strangest thing happened. I felt this powerful force expel me from the train platform. I literally flew probably 10-15 feet down to the gravel behind the train platform, away from the train, and I stood up and the train had blared its horn, I guess, because the conductor saw me there and I was completely unharmed, but I was elated by the experience, which was so very strange. Anyway, when I look back on the events of that day, I can't help but wonder if something supernatural had happened, because there's no way that the train made contact with me because I had no injuries. But certainly, something had forced me out of the path of the train. And I'm not much one to believe in miracles, but to this day, I look back on the events of that night and I cannot reconcile my memory with what I know happened. This story happened in 2006 in Kingston, Ontario. So, at the time, I was attending university at Queen's University there in Kingston, and I lived off campus, probably about a 15-minute walk from the center of campus. And on this particular day, it was an overcast sky. It was probably in the fall, September or October, and I was walking home. After completing my classes for the day, I walked probably about 3/4 of the way home and I was inside of my apartment building where I lived on the 8th floor. And I think I was just thinking about, life and my courses and what I was going to do that afternoon. And all of a sudden, I heard this whisper. I can't explain it. It was fairly quiet, but it was loud enough so that I could hear it. And it was the word Gorstad. And I had no idea what Gorstad meant. So, I looked around. I thought it was strange, but I just kept going home. I was about 6 minutes walk from my apartment building when I reached my apartment building. Out of curiosity, I went on to Google and I searched for the word ghost out and I spelled it Gaustad. And the first thing that came up on Google was the name of a hockey player, Paul Ghost, who played for the Buffalo Sabres, which I thought was strange. So, I checked. I turned on the TV and I searched on the guide because I had cable at the time, and I found that the Buffalo Sabres were playing another team in the NHL. And so, I pressed the button to turn the game on instantly. As soon as I turned the game on, the announcer indicated that Paul Gorstad had picked up the puck in his zone. He began to skate down the ice with the puck, and as he reached the offensive team zone, the offensive zone, He made a play and a few seconds later he scored a goal. And the announcer announced his name, Paul Gorstad. And I was flabbergasted by this, obviously, because it was strange the way that this whisper had predicted the outcome of the next 6 to 10 minutes of my life. And I look back on the implications of what happened because the reality is I wouldn't have looked up the word Gorstad if I hadn't had heard the whisper. And I wouldn't have known to look up the Buffalo Sabres hockey game on TV if I hadn't have looked up the name on Google. So, I asked myself, even to this day, would I have been in a position to observe that player score that goal if I hadn't heard the word? Which raises questions whether or not it was precognitive or whether or not I was simply creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Anyway, it's just another strange example of my experiences and how they relate to simulation theory.